Hello and welcome to today's Knowledge Bank, which will be discussing common maintenance issues with residential buildings. This morning's session will be hosted by Andrew Banister, Regional Director at Earl Kendrick. His varied experience in the property business means that he is able to view a project from both the surveyor's and the client's perspective, for the benefit of all stakeholders. Andrew will be taking your questions throughout and at the end of the session, so please feel free to submit them through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and he will answer as many as possible. Unfortunately, Andrew is having a few technical difficulties with his video this morning, but we're going to push through regardless for Andrew's presentation and friendly voice. So yeah, without further ado, I will hand you over to Andrew. Good morning, Andrew.
Morning, Vicky. Thanks for the introduction there, and good morning to everyone else. Again, apologies that my video is not working, but we've tested the sound and everyone can hear me okay, so that's the main point. As Vicky said, I'm Andrew Banister, and I'm the Director for North and the Midlands office of Earl Kendrick Building Surveyors, and the session today is on the importance of planned maintenance programme for your blocks. Before we get into the main crux of the session today, I'm just going to give a very quick intro into Earl Kendrick Building Surveyors for anyone who has not heard of us. We're chartered building surveyors and we work predominantly in your sector, so that's the residential property management leasehold sector. We've got offices across the country: London, Manchester, Brighton, Birmingham and Bristol, and we have a couple of niche arms within the business that also operate nationwide with the Earl Kendrick Licence to Alter team, the RCA team, your insurance valuations, and EK McQuaid who deal with all party wall and neighbourly matters. So what do we do as chartered building surveyors? I won't read out all the bullet points on the screen, but just a couple of additional points there. Is project management that we do. A lot of it at the moment is on the cladding remediation side, which I'm sure you can imagine is busy. Insurance reinstatement, so after fire and flood damage, we can come in and assess the damage, specify it and oversee the works on site. Major works, all your typical stuff, roof renewal, obviously your PMPs, and we do quite a bit of heritage and conservation as well, working closely with the local conservation officers. So what are we going to cover in this agenda for the next, hopefully 45 minutes? We're going to talk about what is a PMP, instructing a PMP and what information you need to provide to the surveyor, what's included in the document or what you should be expected to find within the documents. A look into the lease and how they play a big part in planned maintenance programmes. We'll look at some common maintenance issues. There's a small section on sort of fire safety and cladding and sort of their relation at the moment with regards to planned maintenance programmes. A little bit on drones and their use. I'll confess now, I'm not a drones expert. We have the EK digital side who deal with all drones and everything. So it's just a few slides really on how useful they are, certainly on some of the larger, more intricate buildings in producing planned maintenance programmes. New builds, because they need maintenance as well. And then finally, conclusion and any questions. But please feel free to ask any questions throughout the session. If you want to drop them in the box or mute yourself and just ask any questions. It can be PMP related. It can be something unrelated to PMPs. If you need a little bit of help on anything that you think I might be able to answer for you, by all means, please don't be afraid to ask. So I'm going to start by setting out some of the key principles that are common to all building types. And first of all, as surveyors, we don't just focus on the existing condition of buildings and identifying existing defects. It's also our job to advise on the future maintenance requirements. So that means we need to have in-depth understanding of how all different types of buildings are constructed, the typical problems and defects associated with them, the requirements on property managers, on yourselves in maintaining such buildings, and how to manage maintenance projects on site, how to formulate all this into one sort of package. And the best way to do this is via a PMP, a planned maintenance programme. I suppose just to add there, I call it a PMP. I think there's many different ways of calling it: PPM, CapEx plan, long-term maintenance plan. Essentially, it's all a different way of saying the same thing. And for the sake of my sanity. I'm going to call it PMP throughout this session, because otherwise I will likely get confused myself. So, what is a PMP? Well, I actually go back on myself here and start by saying it's planned preventative maintenance. It's a PPM, but essentially the planned maintenance program is setting up yourself to ensure that you've got preventative maintenance in place to ensure that no major defects happen, or that before, for instance, a roof needs to be renewed, you've got that measured in place and you can already start forecasting what that's going to cost within the coming years. And essentially it is maintenance that is performed purposely, looking at the structure, looking at the fabric, including the facilities, the plants and equipment of a building, and ensuring there is systematic inspection, detection and correction of failures, either before they occur, being preventative, where actually present, or before they develop into major defects. So each of those last sentences there, either before they occur, where actually present, or before developing into major defects, is all being preventative. Once they come into major defects, or once somebody has suffered the water ingress, so that's when they are becoming reactive. So PMP also helps to identify the point at which such items can be reasonably deemed to have reached the end of their economic lives, such that replacement or renewal is going to be necessary. And PMPs are usually prepared to cover a 5 to 10 year maintenance periods, and they should be regularly reviewed and updated at frequent intervals. And they are live working documents, and they should not be shelved once received, so they should be regularly updated. Ideally, certainly on some of the larger blocks where there are issues and it's in maybe a bit more of a dilapidated state, probably should be checking the PMPs maybe every month, maybe every quarter, once works have been done. They certainly should be reviewed yearly, whether that be via yourselves or in conjunction with the original surveyor, and they should be reviewed by the surveyor or another surveyor every 3 years. And that might not necessarily mean a full inspection on site. It might just mean a cross-reference of the costings put in and have prices changed. And probably, I'm sure you're all aware at the moment that price increases are going up massively, certainly around sort of insulation costs. Things like timber and copper are going to be becoming more expensive as well, as becoming shortages of them. So it's probably a good time now for any PMPs that you've currently got that you've used as live documents to have them updated and reviewed, and make sure that those costs that have been allowed for in the next year or two are actually accurate. So although the term PMP has preventative maintenance within it, it should be acknowledged that maintenance is not always preventative. For instance, there will come a time when the windows or the roofs need to be replaced, and no amount of maintenance will prevent that. And that's where a good building surveyor is vital in completing a solid planned maintenance program. And a couple of pictures up on the screen at the moment of a project I was involved in a few years back. And you can see the photo on the right. There's many patch repairs that have been done to this roof over the years. And the photo on the left, you can see a large black rubber membrane that's been laid down to try and prevent water ingress. And then you've got some membrane sort of tied over the parapets as well to try and stop the water ingress. So we actually came on board here with the managing agent to just first have a look at the roof and give our thoughts. I mean, in all fairness, looking at the condition of this roof and these two photos, you don't really need to be a chartered building surveyor to say that this roof needs to be replaced. But it was about looking at how that works can be done, what was the right material to use, as it was a fairly high foot trafficked area. And it's that point that you can say that roof needs to be replaced. There's no amount of maintenance that you can do to that roof that is going to be worthwhile, good use of the client's money to have the works actually done. It's assessing when that works needs to be done for replacements. And at Earl Kendrick, we realised that it's not yourselves, not the property managers or the managing agents that need convincing of this roof renewal. It's the clients, it's the leaseholders, it's those end users that will not always agree, and they'll want to see some other way of, of maintaining that roof, or they'll want to see reasons and solid evidence as to why it needs to be replaced. And we do this via, the main thing is via core samples of a roof, using a roof as an example. We'll take a core sample during the planned maintenance program inspection, if we can, if there's safe access to the roof, and we'll identify the build-up of the roof. We'll check to see whether there's any water underneath the membrane and any insulation, as that's a good indication that the roof might be towards the end of its serviceable life, this usable life. And then we'll provide options for, potentially phasing the roof repair, roof renewal, and looking for different materials that can be used in the situation. So it's our experience that the best buildings are those that are run strategically with a planned maintenance program in place with a view on the long term, rather than waiting for problems to occur before engaging with the contractors, before engaging with the surveyors. So it's understanding the clear understanding of the building's long-term maintenance cycle, and it certainly doesn't allow the course of action to be dictated by immediate concerns. And again, I've got two examples here on the screen of buildings that I've been involved in. The property you can see on the left photograph is a very large building, listed building on a dockside of a well-known city. Actually, you can only see half the building in this photograph here. So these 4 bays were continued along the other side. So it's a really, really, really big building. And we were informed when he came on board that the client don't believe any major works have been done since the end of the 90s. Everything else has been done sort of ad hoc and repairs, maybe more on a reactive basis than a proactive and preventative basis. So we came on board and we worked with the managing agent here in detail and the clients to understand where the issues were within the building, who had reported what, and used a triage scale to assess the best way of planning the major works for this project. So like I say, the agents had a list of all the flats, a floor layout plan, marked where who had been reporting what issues and when and where and how long they'd been going on for, and we used that information to put together a plan. And we split the building down. You can see the rows of windows on the building, and we used those as individual bays. I think there was probably circa 100 bays around the building, and rather than sort of doing it all in one hit, which is great if you've got endless pits of money, was probably the better option because there was a fair amount of work needed, but the client didn't have that. You can imagine the amount of money involved in scaffolding all that building alone. So we use this triage scale to work out who had been having the worst issues for the longest amount of time, and then separating it down into individual bays and getting the contractor to price for that works individually. So it was a good, sensible use of their money, and it allowed us to forecast the plans then over the next few years. In fact, we're still working on that building at the moment in terms of finalising the plan. But it certainly is going to help the client to put together a sensible plan, and to show all the leaseholders involved, all the stakeholders, that, okay, whilst your flat, your windows might not get painted this year, we can show you that, in 2022, the plan is to, start on that section of works there, use that bay, and, hopefully by the end of 2023, or potentially a little bit longer, depending on, I suppose, what we find in the initial inspections once scaffolding is up, that all the works will have been completed to the building. But additionally, because it's such a building, you don't want to be having to scaffold this every 5 years or every 7 years. So really, they want to spread it out to 10 years' time. So things that we included within the plan was, an enhanced paint system for the windows, because they're on such an exposed location. They're going to deteriorate quicker. So it wasn't necessarily that the Dulux or other products were the best option to go with. So we sourced an enhanced paint product that the manufacturer is potentially willing to give a guarantee for up to 10 years, obviously depending on the condition of the windows that are being painted. I think the difficulty there is, you know, again, an issue that I'll talk about in a few slides' time with regards to ownership of windows and whose responsibility for what. But like I say, that was the options put forward there. And while the enhanced paint system would be you know, a higher cost initially, it's going to allow them to space out the time that works are needed to stretch it out a little bit longer. So the building on the right photograph, again, was one, it's not as big as the one on the left, but was in a really dilapidated state. We came in, and this was a number of years back, that I came in and did a planned maintenance program for them here. On the sort of the first day I turned up on site, it was quite clear that some of the masonry at higher levels was at risk of falling off. So the first thing I did was a call to them and say, you need to get an abseil team down here, and they need to come down and have a day or two and test all the loose masonry and remove it all. And I turned up with the abseilers so we could video call and they could show me areas that they were seeing up there and you know, help to formulate the plan. So once all that had been done and it made safe, plan maintenance, you know, again, ideally you would start from one side of the building and work your way around and complete it all if you've got that endless pit of money, but more often than not it isn't there. So we started off, I think it was this one elevation that you can see, side elevation, and then the next worst elevation was the courtyard side. So it goes to show here that a planned maintenance program is not a case of one size fits all by any means. They are all individual and unique to the building, and you know, some of them can take a long time to actually put together. Whilst the initial program might come over to you within a few weeks following instruction, it might need more work to it after a few months, you know, of once some initial works or further investigation works have been undertaken. And a surveyor will and should highlight that to you literally from the initial inspection, as I did on these two buildings. You know, the photo on the right, loose masonry, and the photo on the left, you know, on initial inspection, I found some, you know, issues with rusting of windows, and made the client aware of them so they could, you know, formulate a plan and we could include it within the planned maintenance program. So moving on to instructing a planned maintenance program and what you should expect, what you should be giving to the surveyors and what they should be asking for. We've produced a fairly simple checklist you can see on your screen here. Most of the stuff is general that you provide to the surveyor, you know, site address, client's name, access details, and we also include here, you know, we want to see copies of the FRA, the fire risk assessment and asbestos management plan. Again, I'll talk a little bit more on in a few slides time. But it's a simple checklist. Not all of it is relevant to every single building. Some of them are very simple. Some of them don't have any internal common parts. So it's just a case of having a look at the outside, you know, assessing the windows, assessing the facades, and having a look at the roof and forecasting any works that are needed. But a couple of things that you might not necessarily supply the surveyor with initially. Number 9 here, we've got special features, and we put an example of river walls, but it could be anything. It could be, I was at a site recently where there was quite an ornate structure, architectural structure in the middle of the developments, but they didn't want that included within the planned maintenance program. So that item was to be removed. So it's just about letting the surveyor know, you know, they don't know the building. It's potentially the first time they'll go to it. So, you know, it's nothing worse than them going to site and missing out on elements because they assume that wasn't included. And river walls is a bit of a prime example there, that they won't necessarily assume that are to be included. And some other elements, again, detailed of any commercial units that are or are not to be included, and any unknown substructures of note. So obviously in London, you know, the tube lines that run right underneath, any sewers, road tunnels, underground rivers that you know of, anything that is a little bit unusual to the building, you know, make the surveyor aware of, because they will need to include that within their plan. As an example of one I did recently where there was it backed onto a canal, and actually getting access to that side of the wall that backed right onto it was quite difficult. So we did need to use a drone. But to do any works to that side of the wall, they're going to need to ensure that the canal river trust are happy with it and that nothing falls into the canal. So it means a case of working out how to scaffold it and how to sheet the building so that when the scaffold is up and they're doing any masonry works or any painting or anything like that, nothing can fall within the canal. So if you pass all this information to the surveyor, they should be able to provide you with a comprehensive fee proposal that is accurate. You know, if you're giving them the address and saying there's maybe 50 flats within the block and they're coming back to you with a price of £500, do a 10-year planned maintenance program, there's a good chance that you're not getting what you assume that you are asking for, or the surveyor has misunderstood something, or that they're only going to provide you with the prices, which might be sufficient, but if you're expecting a report or some evidence to back up what they're saying within their cost spreadsheet, then you want to ensure that they're including this. So providing them with the full information, say exactly what you need, saves for any ambiguity and later on. So what should be included within a PMP? I mean, most of this is sort of, I would say, common sense of what is to be included, but certainly an understanding of the general construction detail, condition of the property, including a presence of any defects and suitable recommended remedies. And clients should also receive information concerning the potential risks associated with the cause of the defects, including the possibility of unchecked defect evolution. So example of that is, rainwater goods might be in good condition now, but there is a large tree overhanging the building, and come autumn time, that tree is going to lose its leaves, and they might block up the rainwater goods. So if that's not checked, that's not removed, then water could potentially backflow, within the building and cause some water ingress for something that is, so minimal and can be easily prevented. And there should be sufficient advice to ascertain and prioritise the immediate, the short, medium and long-term repair or replacement. And this is generally set out by where the costings are associated in that planned maintenance programme. For instance, if we were to turn up on site and see that there are fire compartmentation breaches, you're going to find that those costs associated with that are going to be immediate. They're going to be in year one, and they'll probably be highlighted in the report to say you should undertake these immediately. The short term could be year one, could be year two, and medium term spread out a bit more, and then the long term you're going to find towards the back of the 10-year maintenance programme, or 5-year one, or 15-year one, if that's what you've asked for. There should be detailed information on costs, not just a list of provisional sums. There should be evidence backed up. You've said, as an example, you've said £1,000 for masonry repairs, but how have you calculated that £1,000? Have they just plucked a figure out of the air, or is there some formulas within the spreadsheet and some backup to it as well to say that we've allowed for, 20 square metres of repointing to the parapet, we've allowed for some brick repairs because they haven't been done, we've allowed for 30 bricks to be repaired, and that equates to £1,000. Not just a case of, we provisionally allowed for £1,000 of masonry repairs as that's what we've expected. Okay, great, but we need to see some evidence of that. How have you formulated those costs? We use our own sort of in-house tender analysis. So from actual projects that are relevant to the building, we use those costs against that, included in this cost schedule. And we also use the building cost information service, which is run by the RICS. And we use SPONS as well, which is formulated by REBA. And those two systems are both fed into by large and small companies such as ourselves, and providing their tender analysis, and they produce that and update it normally on a yearly basis. So I've mentioned it a few times, evidence of all findings. So you want to see photographs, maybe you want to see core samples, maybe there's going to be some drawings that go with it, depending on how detailed you want the PMP to be, but there should be evidence of it all. As I say, mention the roof replacement works again. If you're saying it needs to be replaced, then the chances are that the stakeholders involved are going to want to see, well, why? Why should we just accept your word that it is to be replaced? Show us some evidence. How have you come to that decision? So the next one is review of documentation, such as the FRA, the fire risk assessment, and I've underlined review here. This is because the PMP is not a fire risk assessment. It is not an access audit or a health and safety audit or a cladding survey or anything else like that. They are individual instructions, and it is a planned maintenance programme. And it will review the fire risk assessments if that's provided beforehand. And if there is any works that were highlighted in that report need to be done, we would do a check of that and say, yeah, they're done. They look to be, maybe satisfactory. We don't see any issues with them at the moment, or maybe they were done and they don't look good, or maybe they've not been done, and therefore still need to be done immediately, and we've included the costs for them. So it will review those documents, but it's not going to go and do a separate survey of them. So it's not a fire compartmentation survey at all. They are individual instructions. So you should confirm who the document is for, which is fairly straightforward. And as I just mentioned there, again, it's what it shouldn't include is the day-to-day maintenance, testing, cleaning, or security. So we're not going to include in there to clean the carpets every month. If you have those costs, and we assume that they're probably done on some sort of contract, the surveyor can include them for you if you ask them to beforehand and you provide them all. Or again, it is a live document, as I mentioned, so that cost spreadsheet you could include, and if the maintenance costs go up for carpet cleaning and for ground maintenance, then you just update that spreadsheet. And it can be used once you have achieved as your kind of main documents and include all those costings in it, or you can pull the costings out of that and use it on some of the maybe systems or portals that a lot of managing agents have in-house now. So looking at moving on to the lease here and intricacies of the lease and how they play a part in the planned maintenance programme. So a good surveyor will always take care to get a thorough understanding of the intricacies of a lease when dealing with building defects. As an example, one common lease provision is that the landlord is responsible for painting the external surfaces, i.e. the windows, but the leaseholder owns the window frames. This means that the leaseholders, if the leaseholders don't want to have their window frames repaired, the landlord may end up painting over defects, which is clearly far from ideal. And I'll go back to the building that I had on the dock front there. The windows that we inspected, some were in a pretty bad state and had severely rusted. And we highlighted this to them being an issue, obviously, because you're unlikely going to be able to paint over them, or any sort of guarantee that you're wanting from the paint manufacturer. It's not going to be guaranteed for those windows. So then it's almost sort of being done on an ad hoc basis, which means there's more work involved. And again, the issues around that particular building was the long time that they hadn't done any maintenance for. And there obviously could be some discussions, we say, further down the line as to, well, who would then actually be responsible for the costs of the works, as no works have been done for a rather long time. We actually did a sample window removal on that one replacement. It was quite in depth, to say the least. So it was a good job that was highlighted early on. But these leases, again, it can be a case of roof works. Let's say there's a penthouse on the top floor, but there is an assumption that that roof to the penthouse is contributed to by all of the leaseholders in the block. And we've had it before where there's not actually, the lease states that that sole penthouse is responsible for that roof. And that can add up to being quite a considerable sum. So if that is missed within the planned maintenance programme, then there is an assumption that obviously everyone else is then having to pay towards that. And it can cause some issues again further down the line if someone's then at the very last minute said, well, you're going to have to pay £80,000 for this roof now because you're the one responsible for it. Other areas around a lease which we find are common issues with regards to putting together the planned maintenance programme is access to terraces and the waterproofing of them, where maybe leaseholders have the responsibility for the decking, or maybe they have put down a better decking system. We had one instruction where a very lovely building in central London, leaseholder had put down some lovely marble tiles to the terrace, had a license to alter to do it, but within that license to alter, it hadn't specified that the leaseholder would be responsible for lifting and removing the marble tiling in order for the landlord to get access to the membrane and do any repairs or replacement works. So again, that caused a few difficult conversations with the team involved. So the plan maintenance program and the good surveyor will review the lease and pick up on all things like that and make you aware of them. So we say those conversations can be had early on, rather than at the last minute, just when the works are going to go to site. So we're going to have a look at some typical common maintenance issues now. There's no surprise in guessing sort of one of the main ones that we find. It's rainwater goods, which I have already mentioned. This one here was, you can see the actual hopper had been locked. It was with a can of Coke, actually, if I remember rightly, and that might have been due to the workmen on site before striking a scaffolding. Well, the water's just been cascading down this wall for quite a while, given the the algae growth and everything on there. And the photo on the right is a little bit dark, but hopefully you can see the damage it caused internally. Now, what the PMP will have done is, if it had identified that very early on, it would said there's an issue with the hopper there, someone should get up and have a look at it. We would have some ladders on us. I think this building was about 4 stories high, so our ladders weren't going to reach that high. But this is where drone surveys and things like that can be quite useful in identifying such issues. But the rainwater goods should be checked as a yearly thing. I think if that had been checked yearly, it would not have got to that condition, and there wouldn't have been a cost of maybe 100 quid, 200 quid to get someone up there to remove the can of Coke and make sure they test the drains, make sure they're running freely. Like say a few £100, whereas the cost to remediate all the damage internally, I think came in a few £1,000s, because it had run down a full building and destroyed a few different stories. Again, another one on gutters here. You can see the photo on the left, fairly badly rusted, but still in a usable condition. That rust can all be removed, it can be repainted, and that gutter's going to be fine. The photo on the right, completely knackered, needs to be replaced. And in cast iron can be quite expensive to replace as well. So by having regular inspections of it and including those within the plan, it's going to help to ensure that these gutters and the rainwater goods last longer. One here, we've got an overflow pipe been leaking down side of a building. Again, obviously been leaking for quite some time for it to get that bad. And had that been picked up early, there would have been very little damage associated with it, and the whatever the issue was within the leaseholder's flat would have been picked up and would have been resolved. And in fairness to the leaseholder, they probably didn't realise that this was coming from their flat. They probably didn't walk around that side of the building, but the planned maintenance programme will pick that up and early on. Maybe just when the point when there was the white staining before it's gone to the green algae growth, it's I think caused some issues in the window that is around, and some water ingress. So on windows, so this was the property I was speaking about before. It was on the dock front. You can see again how badly the rust is on some of the windows. You're not going to be able to paint over them. There's going to need to be some significant repair or replacement works. So windows, again, we'll check them. So the most often one is timber windows. This one here, it was reported to be in a really, really bad state, but actually it's just paint that was flaking. Once that paint had all been rubbed back and repainted and the timber primed sufficiently, appropriately, and there would have been no issues with those timber windows. So sometimes they can look a lot worse than what they are. So again, the surveyor will be able to pick up on that and advise that if you just paint those properly within the next year, you're not going to have any issues with them going forward. So we mentioned they'll do a bit of a section on drones. I say, I'm not a drones expert. We've got a separate CPD for that session if anyone is interested. Send me an email and we can get that booked in for your company. But they are really, really useful, certainly around areas where buildings are quite difficult to get access to the roof. This photo you can see here, some slipped roof tiles we would never have picked up from ground level. And again, another issue with regards to a missing piece of timber. where that's going to have birds nesting in it, and there's going to be quite a bit of water and grass happening there. So with the drone surveys, here's how we can set out a roof plan for you, and we've broken them all down into separate sections, and we can relate that back to the planned maintenance program. So we can say area G5 needs to have some patch repair done to it, and there's 500 quid put against it. Areas G1, G4 were in good condition. Chimney stack C2 needs this amount of repointing and flaunching works done to it, and so on and so forth. So it becomes quite easy then to really pinpoint the individual parts of the roof that need works to it, rather than just saying, allow £10,000 for roof repair and replacement works. Just a few other photos there of what drones can see that that we can't from ground level. And here's one we did where the drone actually did quite in-depth surveys of individual windows. You can see the drone on the right-hand side there, so we could assess the works needed to the individual windows on this block, which was quite a long task to do, but quite informative. The only other way really you've got of assessing that is putting a scaffolding up. So the drone was it was a useful tool on this instruction. So I mentioned there was a bit of a section on fire safety and cladding. And again, it's just to reiterate that the PMP it's not a cladding survey, it's not an external wall survey by any means. Fire safety and cladding is a complex issue and an individual issue that needs to be dealt with separately. And not all building surveyors have the competence to assess the cladding and external wall survey, or the PI for as well, which again, I'm sure you all know, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. So they are individual instructions, but what the PMP can do is if you've had the cladding survey done and the external wall survey and it's highlighted issues, we can look at that and provide costings for you on it. So we can do that assessment for you. It obviously is a little bit more than a standard planned maintenance program, but it can be incorporated if that's what you want. But it is important you set that out from the start so the surveyor can provide you with an accurate fee proposal for it. As I mentioned, it's not fire risk assessments, but any obvious visual compartmentation breaches will be highlighted and advice given. That advice is more often than not going to be have a compartmentation survey done. There's a couple of photos here on the right-hand side of planned maintenance inspection we did. Obviously, the top photo, just not appropriate, very poor workmanship. That there's going to be issues associated with that. And in the same building, the photo on the bottom right, there was an issue with fire doors where the laminate to them seems to be bubbling off. You might not be able to see it on the door on the right-hand side. The actual glazing pane is starting to mist, frost over. So there was clearly an issue with that. So they were highlighted within the actual plan maintenance program, and advice was to have independent surveys done. On the last bullet point here, it's got on large developments, sample fire doors and risers will be inspected only. So yeah, like I say, it's not an individual compartmentation survey, but we will go and inspect fire doors. Like I say, if there's a large building, 100, 150, 200 flats within it, and there's likely to be quite a few fire doors, so we're not going to inspect each and every one. So there will be a sample done of random areas on different floors. On a smaller building, we may be able to inspect each and every one and provide some advice for you on that, but they are individual instructions. I can see someone's put a question into the box. I will come to that at the end of the session, if that's okay. Apologies, bear with me a second. I've just lost control. Here we go. Right, controller's back. So moving on to new build. And planned maintenance is just as necessary when it comes to brand new buildings. I've often heard people say that because it's a new building, it won't need maintaining, or that there's no need to worry because there are guarantees. But that's very, very naive and inaccurate. Every building needs to have a planned maintenance program put together for it. Sometimes it can be very simplistic. If it's a small new build, it can be very easy to do. Sometimes it's a lot more difficult, and considerations need to be given to certain elements. So as well as natural deterioration over time, the other thing that can change is the standards by which properties are judged, as I'm sure we are all aware of in this current time. So the relevant legislation and statutory requirements for property are regularly updated, often pushing up those standards. So ideally, a full planned maintenance programme should be undertaken from day one to ensure that expectations are managed and that service charge levels are sufficient so that there are no nasty surprises. Using these two photos again as an example, they are from the same building actually. The photo on the left, you can see that you've got quite a bit of algae growth to the render there, and it was a fairly new building. And actually, because the render, this elevation was on a busy main road, it deteriorated quickly in terms of an aesthetic point of view. And then we've got rainwater runoff from the balcony that's caused this algae growth. And once that starts deteriorating, it's going to deteriorate quicker. So the planned maintenance programme for that will have included for regular cleaning of that one elevation. Whether that be from doff cleaning and steam cleaning, repainting of the elevation to ensure it looks aesthetically pleasing, because that's an important part too. It's not just necessarily about physical defects that cause water ingress and other issues. There is an aesthetic point of view as well. If you're trying to sell your flat and someone turns up and the building looks like that, it is going to devalue it. So there's items like that need to be considered. And also, I mentioned there, guarantees included for new builds. Yes, they are included, but they need to be incorporated within the planned maintenance programme, because they will have a lot of caveats and terms and conditions in them. And one of them might be to do, yearly inspections of the roof membrane. So the PMP will include for that, because it will have looked at that guarantee and said, well, yeah, you need to do it. And who does that need to be undertaken by? Are they just happy, a property manager undertaking that inspection, or do they want it to be a roofer or a chartered building surveyor? And it will be set out within the terms and conditions there. So new build is just as important, if not more important, than the existing stock, because it's a way of getting ahead of the defects that can occur, of the maintenance, and being really preventative. And if you get a planned maintenance program involved from day one after practical completion, you'll never really have to have it done again. It should be regularly updated, and it's going to be able to be as accurate as possible. So new build, just as important, if not more important, than the existing stock. So yeah, just another sort of photograph here on the new build side and on windows. One that I come across quite often with powder coated aluminium windows, where they've maybe been told, or that there are minimal maintenance of these windows, which is true to a certain degree, but there is certainly maintenance needed to them. And what you have here is the cleaning of them and removing all the dirt that can break down the microns and the layers. Once it's broken down to a certain amount of layers, the window is no longer going to be able to be cleaned, because the cleaning products could start to deteriorate the aluminium surfaces behind it, and then you're going to start to have more issues. So they do need to be regularly maintained. And again, in certain locations where there aren't front onto busy roads, and they're going to get more dirt, more grime, more pollutants build up, they need to be more regularly inspected. And again, the planned maintenance program will include for that. So just coming to the end now, and a few sorts of final things for you to take away with. So do have a plan, remain as proactive as possible, and avoid unpleasant surprises. So again, if it's a building, you haven't got a planned maintenance program for it, the best time to get one is today, and the next best time to get one is tomorrow. Get one in place as soon as possible, and stick with it, and make sure it is regularly updated. They are dynamic live documents that need regular reviewing and updating. The RICS is due to provide some guidance this year. I think it's their first one they'll have done on planned maintenance programs. And in fact, they actually call them planned preventative maintenance PPMs. Within that document, it is going to state that they should be updated or reviewed yearly as a minimum, and a further thorough survey update, should be done every 3 years, likely by a chartered building surveyor. So that's the kind of where the industry guidance is at the moment on it. And a first class maintenance strategy will save money in the long run, even though PMTPs track cost in the short term. Yeah, that is 100% they will do, as long as they are, again, maintained. The initial one will be thorough, but it does need to be maintained by yourselves or by the original surveyor. Don't abandon maintenance inspections because of COVID. I suppose it's becoming less relevant, hopefully. We're hopefully 21st of June, we should be back to normal, fingers crossed. But again, or anything else that may happen, don't abandon maintenance. I suppose COVID, don't abandon maintenance because of cladding issues as well. I know that a lot of our clients, their main issue at the moment and thing to deal with is cladding related issues. But if you neglect any other maintenance issues, so any blocks that don't have cladding and maybe a little bit more simplistic, those issues are going to eventually become major defects. So, just don't forget about all the other blocks that you've got in your portfolio. And all buildings deteriorate, even new buildings, which we've just touched on there. So that is the end now. I think it was about 45 minutes. I'll go through the questions now. So the first question is, what is a reasonable price for a drone survey to inspect roofs and external walls on a tower block? I don't know the answer on that one, a reasonable price. I can tell you what we charge. We charge a half-day rate of £595, and we charge a full-day rate of £995. So we would assess each and every one as individual. If it's, the chances are most blocks we can get around in a day, but that fee of £995 provides you with just the photographs. If you want that then in a report format that analyzes the defects and provides you, with that bit more of that planned maintenance program, then that is an additional fee. But the initial drone survey, like I say, for most blocks, you can get around in a day, and obviously for the smaller blocks, half the day. Hopefully that answered the question for you. If you've got one that in particular you're looking at, then if you want to drop me an email, I'll put you in touch with our digital side and I can give you a cost for it. Can the cost of maintenance works for aesthetic purposes on the external wall, etc., not necessarily deemed essential, be reclaimed from the service charge? Probably something that's a little bit outside of my remit, I would say. I'm not a lease expert. I can sort of read a lease and provide some guidance on it, but I think that question is something that you'd probably have to speak to a solicitor on. I'm pretty sure there has been a few sort of CPD sessions around that. I think there's some person, Cassandra Zanelli, who can provide you some advice on that from PM Legal Services. But like I say, it's not one that I can really give you a definitive answer on, I'm afraid. So I think they were the only two questions. Unless anyone's got any other questions at all, then I'll say thank you very much for listening in. Hope you found it useful. And like I say, if you've got any other questions or you need some advice, you probably all got my email address, and please feel free to email me.
Thank you, Andrew. I think that brings today's session to a close then. Now the questions are done. Thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge today, and thank you everybody else for joining us. I hope that you found today's session useful. Today's webinar has been recorded, so we will be sending out the recording to all participants, anyone that didn't manage to join live, with a copy of your presentation. And if anyone has got any questions, then please feel free to submit them, and I'm sure Andrew will be happy to get in touch with you after the webinar. So yes, please keep a lookout on the News on the Block website for more of our upcoming knowledge banks. But for today, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much.
Cheers all. Thanks, Vicky. Take care.
Bye.